Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. This will be another short live session on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm on Thursdays. I'm in the Three Amigos with Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time and Matt the Lumberjack Landlord, and they both do live streams on weekends. And so Mike's got Saturday covered, Matt's got Sunday. So I figured I'd pick a day of the week, trying Tuesdays out to see if this matches up with when people can get on and check it out. But the topic I'm going to cover tonight is one that comes up a lot. This question comes up, and it's almost like people trying to get into real estate are looking for somebody to hold their hand and walk them down the aisle to a rental. And that's not really how it works. The question of how do you pick a real estate market comes up, and it's probably one of the ones that a mentee shouldn't ask a mentor, because we all invest a little bit different. And when we're analyzing a market, what we're looking for is going to be very different. When it comes to picking a market for me, I want to self-manage. So priority for me is distance from where I live. But some people do live in a high cost of living area, so they have to look at other areas. And it's really hard to just open up a map of the United States and just say, what data would I need to pick a market? So to me, the most important thing that's like at the top of the list, we'll go down a list of probably about 5 things. But the first one is, do you have a tactical advantage? There are investors in almost every market. And if you look at things that are on Redfin, Zillow, or on the MLS for a couple of days or weeks or months, there's a reason why investors that are in that market are passing on that deal. So do you have the advantage of, do you live there? That's my priority, is do I live there? Because then I'll know the neighborhoods, because it's very different to invest 2 streets over might be a war zone that you're not comfortable going in to collect the rent. And if you don't know the neighborhoods, it's really hard to invest there. So you either live there or you used to live there, because there are towns I've lived in the past where I'm comfortable knowing I know which areas I would avoid and which areas I would like to invest in. If you don't have that advantage and you need to invest at a distance, the next thing I would look for is, do you have somebody you know that you trust who lives in that area? But I would also want to make sure that they're somehow associated with real estate. Are they an agent, a property manager, maybe a contractor, somebody you can rely on them to help you choose which areas to invest in or not to invest in? So first is, what is your tactical advantage? The second and the easiest thing I think to get as far as data goes is figuring out if population is growing or shrinking in an area. Right now, a lot of people are moving out of states like California and New York. We have, with the pandemic, for the first time, people can work at a distance. You don't have to live where you work. We have work at home options that just didn't exist before. More kids are being schooled at home, and hopefully that's going to get back to normal or back to in person more. But families are looking for homes outside of cities. And if you track trends, you can do things like go to U-Haul. U-Haul has a website that tracks where their trucks are moving. Some counties will have websites based, showing population trends on whether they're going up or down, but not all keep the same information. Some areas will have what is called an Affordability Index, which basically a real estate association comes up with data that says the average person with the average income is able to buy a house. The higher the number, the easier it is for that person to buy a house. The lower the number, the harder it is. So as a person who wants to invest, the higher number I would want to be buying there. The lower number I'd want to be selling there. So do you have your tactical advantage? What's going on with the population? The third thing I look for if I'm looking at a market, and one of the reasons why I picked the market that I actually live in and invest in, is I want to have several economic drivers, sources of tenants, like a base, a port, a college, a hospital, a Boeing or Amazon terminal, a large population, so that several things would have to change for my rentals to be impacted. If a town exists where one company going away would decimate the population, I wouldn't want to invest there. So in my area, we have Joint Base Lewis McChord, one of the largest installations on the West Coast. We've got the ports, we've got Boeing and Amazon here. There are several other large companies. So I'm comfortable investing here. If you're looking at a market, the entire country, and you're looking in different states, what major companies are in that area so that you have sources of tenants? So far, I'm talking about looking at the areas. When you finally kind of start settling on an area that you want to invest in, there's something that I bring into real estate from law enforcement. When I was a police officer, you never get to a crime scene and think, okay, so my opinion is this happened. Let me find evidence to back it up. It's the same way in real estate. You don't say, I want to invest in small multifamily. So I'm going to find a market and then I'm going to invest in small multifamily there. There are markets where small multifamily might not cash flow, or there might be too much competition because there's too many other investors in that area. When you find the market that you want to invest in, where you have the tactical advantage, where you are pretty confident in the population going up, not down, and you have several economic drivers, so you have several sources of tenants, then you look at that region to try to figure out which strategy fits there. Investing in a vacation town where Airbnb is accepted and encouraged and the municipalities behind it and you can make a ton of money, that's a strategy you would look at. If you're in an area where, I think it's like in Las Vegas where the hotel chains have lobbied and fought really hard to keep Airbnb out of there, that's not the way I would invest there. So when you pick the strategy, like here in Washington State, I invest in 2 counties because you have to pick the size of your footprint. And part of this can be based on population. Is it an area where people have acreage or where, everybody is packed in really tight? So if you're like Michael Zuber, he narrowed it down to zip codes, and even the zip codes were a bit too large. Something to consider when you're looking at picking your area, the size of your footprint, is talk to a real estate agent and ask how that area is divided. Some states would have regions, so where MLS access is based on, their licensure to have access to the MLS is based on that region. Sometimes it's zip code, sometimes it's the county outline. So that's one way to help pick where you're going to look, making sure your agents are going to have access to the same area that you want to look in. Somebody is investing successfully in an area that you look at. There are people who say, I live in San Diego or I live in Seattle, so there's no way you can invest here. Property prices are too high, rents don't justify it, but there is some strategy that's working. And in some cases, the more expensive the area, the more important house hacking is. If you can eliminate your housing costs and it's a larger thing to eliminate, that's a better impact than if you live in a really low cost of living area where you can find rent for $500 or $600 a month. That's not as big an impact to eliminate that expense. I do understand that sometimes a market is too expensive for even house hacking to make sense. Your advantage is the population growing? Are there multiple economic drivers? What strategy is going to work for you? The last thing, we've gone through all of these strategies to pick a market. The last thing we're going to look at is the type of property. Some properties are more attractive to the tenants. And the goal when you're investing in real estate is to make your property as attractive to the largest group of people that you can. Kind of one of my tenant screening criteria is getting a property that's going to help me limit tenant turnover. So in my area, I'm not really relying on college students. I have a friend who invests in a town called Bellingham where that's all he does. He invests by the room to college students. So he wants 4 or 5 bedrooms per unit to rent out by the room, and he wants as many bathrooms as he can to try to line up the number of bedrooms with the number of bathrooms. In my area, single bedroom units have more turnover. So I tend to go for 2 bedrooms with a garage because more space equals more stuff. More stuff equals less likely to move. So what structure of property is going to be the most attractive in your region? So you're going to have to decide that. If it's on the coast, is it access to the beach? If it's inland, is it access to the hospital if you're doing traveling nurses? Is it proximity to a college? Is there a tourist thing? Are there large companies where the employees want to work but don't want to live where the company is? Maybe it's too rural or too urban, and they want to have that right amount of commute. So looking at the physical aspects of the property, to me, is almost the last thing that we do. Those are the things that make the most sense to me. So from top to bottom, one more time. What is your advantage? Do you live there, or did you used to live there, or do you know somebody who lives there and knows the neighborhoods? Is the population growing? Are people moving there or moving away from there? How many companies or sources of tenants are in the area? What strategy are you choosing? Because when you're looking for properties, if you're looking to flip or if you're looking to buy and hold, your numbers are going to look very different. All of this, I haven't even talked about the metric you're going to use to pick the property, because that's a completely separate thing. Some people will say things like, I want to find an area where I can hit the 1% rule. I have 3 words for 1% rule: flawed and outdated. The 1% rule made a lot of sense in 2010 when there were a bunch of foreclosures that hit the market, and you had to filter down through a bunch of properties to find the few that made sense. And so you could narrow it down by 1%. I have 16 rental units. All of my properties get a better than 10% cash on cash return, and not one of them, not even my best deal, comes close to the 1% rule. That's how outdated and flawed it is. And the 1% rule is kind of like using the CapEx method, not CapEx, cap rate. And if you're investing in 4 units or less, like I do with residential loans, because I prefer 30-year fixed rate debt to commercial loans for 5 units or more, I've never found a way to use cap rates to make sense on residential properties. The 1% rule and cap rates don't take into things like, are you mortgaged? Are you, do you have a $500 a month HOA or no HOA at all? Or property taxes $1,000 a year or $16,000 a year? So the metric that I use, once I go through all of these things, there are some other things that you can pick and choose from, but they don't have as much priority for me. Some people will say things like, well, I want a place where the property taxes are in the favor of the landlord. Tenants pay property taxes. Whatever the property taxes are, that gets filtered through to the rents. And I'll hear people say things like, I want to invest in a state that's landlord friendly. Or to keep it not political, some people say blue state versus red state. In Washington state, it's pretty much a red state except for King County. King County is so blue and so populated, it makes it a blue state. I've heard Grant Cardone talk twice on BiggerPockets, and he's the first person I've ever heard to say the opposite of what I heard from everyone else. Almost everyone I've heard as a landlord or an investor says, I want to look for a property that's landlord friendly because it's easier to evict tenants, it's easier, you don't have rent control, things like that. Grant Cardone pointed out, in blue areas, it's harder to build. You restrict building by having harder permits, more restrictive building, which causes appreciation. So depending on the investing strategy you're using, there isn't a right answer to, do you want to invest in a red or a blue state? It's what strategy fits for where you are investing. So there's my breakdown at the beginning of this video, and I will probably cut this out and make it into its own video on how to choose a market. There are a lot of other things that you need to consider. Are you going to self-manage? Are you going to use a property manager? Because I know people who invest where they live but still use a property manager. So it's not like that's the main reason to do it. I self-manage. I have a list of reasons why I self-manage, but I'm going to be investing in different states. Part of that depends on where I'm going to be working. Our CDL school is growing, and as we're adding campuses, I'm going to be investing in other states so that I can house hack in multiple locations. I'm going to look at the chat really quick, get to some questions. And tonight we'll go as long as my voice holds out and the questions keep coming. If you could tell, get stuffed up. So, Andrew, howdy. Chester, got the scruffy beard. Yes, I'm going to see how that goes. And sounding nasal. Thanks for noticing. Yes, I have tried every drug known to man today to clear that up and not having any luck. I do, yes. Howdy, Larry. Jeremy. It's Santa coming. Yeah, nice. Good evening. I have a deal falling apart because of HOA rules on leasing. Not sure that they are enforceable, especially with Airbnb lawyer time. Yeah, lawyer time. Get a copy of their DCNRs, look at their rules. One of the main reasons I avoid HOAs is the boards seem to be full of people who have nothing better to do than mess with their neighbors. And one of the problems with HOA that a friend of mine ran into is he purchased the property, had a tenant there for about 5 years. I think it was just under 5 years. The tenant moved out, and the HOA at that point in time was over their cap on how many rental units they could have. Even though he had a renter in there, they were fighting him on putting another renter in there. He ended up winning, but it was like a 3-month pretty much fight. So even though he won in the end, it was 3 months without rent. Andrew, David Green's book on long distance real estate investing is a gold mine of good tips for beginners, but I wouldn't recommend for brand new rookies. Right. So I've actually given away that book several times, David Green's book on long distance real estate investing. There are a couple of investing strategies that a lot of people come into the real estate world and say, I want to start flipping, or I want to use the Burr method because it doesn't take a lot of capital and I can recycle my capital. But those are kind of risky. And I've said this several times before. I wouldn't start with those strategies. I wouldn't recommend investing at a distance as a starting strategy, but there are some times where you just live in an area where it doesn't make sense to invest there. So you have to invest at a distance. If you're going to do that, if you have to, start with David Green's book. Actually, give me just a second because I might sneeze. I'm going to give away a copy of David Green's book, the book on long distance investing. In the chat, if you leave a comment tonight, I'm going to go through the first 20 people. I don't have my dice here. It's on my other desk. And I'll reach out and I'll roll the dice and figure out who won, and I'll give away an Audible copy. I can't do hard copies. I found out some people live in countries where it costs like $400 to mail them something. So Audible copies. And if you have David Green's book and you're the one who wins when I roll based on the number of comments that I go down, pick a different Audible book. So, yeah, howdy. Strangely, I have a friend who's taking me to dinner to get your advice on buying his first home. Literally one step ahead of him in this journey, but he's looking to me like I'm a mentor. That's a scary spot to be in because there are some topics when people ask me, I still know to say, I don't know. That's not something I can comment on. If you're not very far ahead of them, be prepared to say, that's a great question. I haven't thought of that. Let's find out together so that you're less likely to give bad advice. When I first started answering questions in the BiggerPockets forums and the real estate rookie group, I had, I think, 10 units at the time. I had 11 units when I first started saying, I'm going to start answering questions and give advice. I would give some advice and realize I had left some Swiss cheese holes in my answer, and other investors would pounce on me. And I realized I really have to understand the difference between a home equity line of credit and a cash out refinance before I even answer a question. So let me know how that goes. I'm still in the middle of doing my first deal, my second and third coming. Nice. Jersey Trucker. Howdy. So, Dion, do you think rates are still going to stay low? I have a bet going with Michael Zuber and Matt the Lumberjack Landlord where they think rates are going to go up. I think they're going to go down. I think by July or August of next year, they'll be under 3.5. I think deflation is more scary to the government than inflation is. Inflation actually helps the government. I mean, you don't want it too bad, but they do shoot for at least 2% a year because it's easier to pay off debt when there's inflation. And our government is $29 trillion in debt. Deflation scares them. So if things start to deflate because people are saving money, they're not spending money, the metaverse is going to change the way we spend money. I personally think rates are going to be going down. So, Danny, lots of good info on this video. Videos. Thanks for sharing your knowledge in a down-to-earth kind of way. Thank you. Sorry for the congestion tonight, though. I'll talk about down-to-earth. Mike, howdy. Yeah, Charity, wealth of information. I mean, I always read these because some people listen and they have the app closed. Which is my second recommendation. If you consume content on YouTube, I would recommend getting YouTube Premium. Never having a commercial. I hate commercials. One of the ways that I've actually helped myself reach financial freedom is I haven't seen a commercial in 10 years. all streaming, Netflix, the upgraded Hulu, anything that doesn't have a commercial, YouTube Premium. Um, but you can also play it with the app closed, which makes YouTube a lot more user friendly. Um, Danny, sorry, I lost the chat. Nick, I think. So glad I caught a live feed. I just bought a duplex with one zone heat. The thermostat is on the first floor with the lower tenant. The second, third floor is the second tenant. What would you do? I would definitely look at separating those. I think that could cause issues. The most important thing to me with, not most important, a really important thing to me with small multifamily is getting the tenants responsible for as much of their utilities as possible. And where I invest, that's not really possible with water. They don't let you separate the meters. It always goes in the landlord's name. But whatever the cost, I would put electric meters in each one. If I could separate heat, I would do that too, especially if that the tenants in the other floors are responsible for electricity, but they can't control what the heat is set at. So I would talk to a contractor and find out what your options are. Sorry, I missed that one when it went by the first time. Carrie, have you done a cash out refinance? What was your experience? I have not. I have done some refinances rate and term. I'm in the process right now of looking at a cash out refinance, but I am right on the fence. I have a paid off property and I have about 55% equity, and I like to stay around 70% equity. So logic and numbers tell me I should do a refinance and to get about, I want to be at 70% equity. I like 70% loan to value on my properties. That way I feel like I'm benefiting from the most principal pay down and appreciation that I can without having as much of my money into the deals as I need to. But I also like the comfort that comes from knowing I have a paid off property. And there's that gap between mortgages and rental income. But since I spent so much time with Matt, the lumberjack landlord, and Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time, they've been doing this longer. Their portfolios are larger. They are smarter than me. So they've got me paired up with Matt, the mortgage guy, and I'm looking at doing a cash out refinance on that house. Um, if my portfolio was smaller and I only had one or two rentals, or I was just starting out, I would only do a cash out refinance if it either got me a better rate on the mortgage that was on the house now, or I had a place to deploy the funds. I would want to make sure I knew of a place to put that money to work. Since my portfolio is larger, so there's different points in your timeline where you look at investing differently. At my portfolio size, it isn't harmful to take the money out, put it into an account, and then wait to see what deals pop up. But just because I'm doing that now, I wouldn't recommend somebody doing that only has one or two rentals and doesn't have the cash flow to support the thousands of dollars I could lose if I don't find a deal. If a really good deal doesn't pop up to put that money to work for by 2024, I'm probably going to do like Michael Zuber is going to do and just take that money, pay off the mortgage, pay the interest on it, and cancel off that debt. But that's later in the investing cycle than when somebody's just starting out. Mark, could you talk a little about some of the systems you have in place to set expectations with your new tenants? What's really important with me with tenants is letting them know how I communicate and letting them know I still work full time. Somebody just asked me this question the other day in a instant message. When you communicate with tenants, do they think you are the owner or the manager? So my tenants know that I'm the owner, so I'm transparent with that. But I use the phrase, I have some partners that I check things with. So if a tenant asks me for something, and it's something I've never encountered before, I'm going to go and ask other investors, which are my partners, because they've got the knowledge to tell me if this is good or bad or if I'm being taken advantage of. That way, it's not me being the only person to say no. But so the systems, I can't always answer my phone. I can always answer a text and I can always answer an email. If anything is important, I want it to go through email because that's admissible in court. Some areas text might be, but in Washington state, I know emails are admissible. So for some small conversations, the sink is leaking, this needs fixed, texts are fine with me. If I have a tenant that I have had a handyman go to and fix a couple of things at their property, small things, whatever, I can connect that tenant with the handyman so that if something breaks, the handyman I've not trained, I've come to an agreement with what the threshold is on fixes that they can do where they just have to let me know, or fixes where they have to call and ask for permission. If a tenant says the refrigerator is making noise, the handyman's not just going to go out and buy a new refrigerator. I'm going to go by and find out what's going on, and then I would be involved in that purchase. So setting those expectations, and I always say to the tenants, fire, flood, or blood, you get a hold of me, right? 911 first, but after anything like that, if somebody's hurt, but if it's just a flood, you have to get a hold of me immediately. And that doesn't have a time on it. Um, Texting and emails. The reason I don't like to talk on the phone is because I can forget what was said. We could both forget what was agreed to, but in text or email format, you have a date timestamp with when you talked. And like I said, it can be used in court. So what goes to the handyman? I choose if something needs a specific licensed contractor. So my handymen know that if it's on the roof or in the electric panel, they're not going to handle it. They're going to tell me what needs to be done. I don't do the binder method right away. So if I inherit tenants, the first month or two, I go and I fix small things. So I let them know I'm going to take care of the place. I ask them if there's anything they would like fixed, and then I put in keyless or coded locks so that they don't have keys, and I put in motion sensor LED lights on the exterior, just kind of a standard upgrade I do everywhere that I buy. And then usually tenants will have one or two small things like a drawer that doesn't work, or one tenant wanted a screen door. After a couple of months, then I'll use the binder method to get the tenant to request the rent increase, because that gives me a couple of months to screen them. Since I didn't get to vet the tenant, I didn't get to check their credit score, eviction status, or anything like that. I want to make sure that I know they pay on time, they don't have noise complaints, they don't call me for really trivial things. I explain things that are trivial, and for the most part, my tenants haven't had very much problems calling me for very trivial things. I've had one couple who was younger that I basically sat down and had a couple of Dion talks with them on, as a tenant, these are things you take care of. These are things you call the landlord for. After about the fourth or fifth time I was called out for something like the dishwasher was loose, like stuff like that. So really setting expectations is easier to do with a conversation than with, I haven't had good luck, even with investors that I work with, where they write up a formal agreement to send out saying, this is how we communicate. Well, I don't like that distance that creates. Chester, did you already do the giveaway for Michael Zerber's books? I did. I gave away one. The other person hasn't reached out yet. ISA something was their name. They haven't reached out yet. Oh no, unless you're referring to the 3 that he's giving out now. I have not done those giveaways, so I'll be doing that this week. I will definitely be giving those books away, but not today. Jeremy, I need the address to send you in the chat. I need the address to send you Neti-Pot. Interestingly, the restriction by this HOA has made homes 10 to 20,000 less on the market than the exact same addition across the street. No investors, less growth. Right. I often hear people say, I want to buy with an HOA because they keep the place nice, so the property values go up. Well, it scares away investors. So property values don't appreciate that much, too. It goes both ways. Dawn, howdy. Chicken soup and Zycam should be in your plans this evening. Yes. I made a group called Tacoma Fi for financial independence, and Tuesdays we meet once a month. They're meeting tonight. I'm not going to make it. I don't want to take this and give it to everybody. So if any of those guys are on here, sorry, I'm not going to make it tonight. Larry, what are 3 major points of David Green's out-of-state investing book? The biggest takeaway from his book for me, which I invest locally, so I just listened to it. Anyways, I got it and listened to it. Your team build your team. There's the 4 people on your team, and he lists them out. I don't have them memorized, so I'd probably butcher it if I tried to say it now. But your lender, your agent, your property manager, your contractor. There's probably whatever that team is. Uh, that's the main thing. Get your people in place, and that's investing locally. I do the same thing. I know my handyman here. I know my contractors here. I know how to find more contractors here. I've developed really good relationships with the agents. Um, yeah, so there's probably more takeaways for that in that book, but that's the main thing that I remember is building your. I think he calls it something like your fabulous 4 or your fantastic 4 or something like that. And then I have no idea what that means, Marion. Eli, do you want to discuss self-management? Personally, I think property managers aren't that helpful. Oh, I have a great Batman voice I should tell about my son because he just piped in that he loves the Batman voice. I love the Batman voice too. Let me know if you want me to share that story. Self-management. So there's reasons why I self-manage. One, the binder strategy. I don't know that I would trust a property manager to get the tenants to request a rent increase. It would be nice, but I just don't know that they're going to. Nobody's going to treat your property as well as you do your own. But at some point, it makes sense. Like I could strip off the shingles on a roof and put new ones on. I could probably take months to educate myself on the right to do it and safety procedures and all that kind of stuff, right? But I'm not going to do that. I want to hire a professional to go up there with insurance, bonded, all that kind of stuff, and pay for the knowledge of how to do it. If I didn't have people skills, I would definitely use a property manager. If I didn't get my systems in place to where managing 16 rental units took me less than 2 hours a month, I would probably have a property manager. Property manager for 2020 would have cost me about $19,000. This year it would have cost me over $21,000 with zero turnover. So I made about $700 an hour to manage my own properties. But at some point, it makes sense to outsource. I want to travel. Right now, I do 1 month a year. Starting in 2022, I'm doing 3 months a year where I'm going to go do something. So it might make sense at some point to have a property manager. And when I do that, the one thing that keeps me from having a property manager is the fee structure. I'll go through just like a contractor or a lender or an agent, and I'll vet several property management companies till I find one that I know that there's good synergy with. But the fee structure will have to be the way that I like it. I don't mind a monthly fee. I'm paying somebody a percentage, and when you first start, if you have one rental, they're probably going to want 10% because they're going to take up you're just putting your system in place takes up that much. But as you add units, you can negotiate that down because they already have everything in place for you. They're just adding more units. So I've got property managers now offering me 6% of monthly gross rents, which that's probably what I'll take when I go for it. It's a fair rate. But as a property owner, tenant turnover is expensive. Somewhere between $2,000 and $7,000 on an average tenant turnover because of flooring and paint and small things that need fixed and the advertising and screening tenants and all that kind of stuff. I don't want that. So if a property management company charges a fee to place a tenant, that means that they're motivated for there to be tenant turnover. So I want a property management company that charges a monthly fee, can upcharge when they send a handyman out to do something because they've got to pay the employer side of managing that. I get that. But I want a zero charge for tenant placement because I want them just as terrified of a tenant turnover as I am. Not terrified. I just don't like them. I want them to not like them too. That's the one thing that keeps me from going property management. My brother, he has property manager. He has 10 units. He has them handled with property management, but he travels all the time. So it makes more sense for him to do that. And the Batman voice. If a couple people say you want to hear the Batman story about my son, I will tell you. YouTube Premium is worth 10 bad real estate courses. Yeah, that's true. Greg, have you had issues with YouTube Premium shutting down after a period of time with the screen closed? I have not. Could be a setting on your phone. And I have had times where, yes, so I've had times where it does that, where just anytime the screen actually closes and goes black, that it'll stop. You have to close the app completely down. So if you have an iPhone, swipe up and away so that it goes away, and then reopen the app. There's been 1 or 2 times where it did do that, so I remember that happening. Chester. Zinc is the most powerful mineral that is well known to combat against the common cold. So I recommend throat lozenges with zinc in them. So I will probably, after this is over, down about 3.5 bottles of NyQuil and turn my phone off so I can't drunk text anybody, and then sleep until tomorrow. Um, okay. Like to read David Green's book. Thanks. True. I'm still struggling to get a deal in the hyper competitive market. I'm looking for any edge I can. Something that's worked for me is doing a higher earnest amount. So the most important thing in my market to get a deal accepted is speed. A lot of us get in this mindset of, if we were the seller, what would we do? I would use an agent, put it on the market, wait several days to get as many offers in as I could, figure out the best offer that's the most likely to close, that has the other elements I'm looking for. But that's not every seller. The funniest question that I get is when somebody says, why would they sell a cash flowing property? There's got to be a catch. I would never buy that. And we could never know why somebody sells a property. So sometimes it's an inheritance where they just go with the first offer that hits what their listing price was. So if you make an offer within an hour at asking price, and 5 hours later an above asking price offer goes in, somebody who's taking care of a will take the first offer. They don't have so speed matters more than anything. So make sure your agent is fast, make sure your lender is fast. Um, but a higher earnest money is the way to go, as long as you have an inspection clause. You have your time period that you can back out of the deal and not lose your earnest money. Sometimes sellers don't look at it that way. They look at $5 or $10 or $15,000 that could just be theirs if you back out of the deal. That might help in a competitive market. Nick, thank you. Michael, can you talk about the 40-year mortgage pros and cons? Thanks, Dion. Love the content. So 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, probably 15-year mortgages were kind of more normal. And it made sense because interest rates were in the 70s and 80s, 18%. So the shorter you could do the mortgage, the less you could pay in interest. It had a huger, that's a good word. Words are hard. It had a bigger impact. Interest rates are so low that you're borrowing under inflation. So some commercial borrowers will borrow loans where they never pay the principal. They do interest-only loans. As long as the numbers make sense, for me, I want the mortgage as long as possible. So I'm going with 30-year mortgages now because that's what's been kind of normal, but 40-year is going to be normalized soon, and it's going to make prices of properties go up. Home buyers, the person who's buying a place to live in, will pay the most because they buy based on payment. And if you stretch it out from 30 years to 40 years, payment goes down. You still have low interest rates and then a longer amortization schedule, so you have lower payments. So they can actually spend more on the house. Jumbo loans just went up. So FHA and those kind of owner-occupied loans, the values are higher. Last year, they took away the limit on VA loans. There's literally no limit on the amount you can borrow with a VA loan. So those prices will go up for that. Investors buy based on yield. So it's another one of the reasons why I think property prices are going to continue to go up for the next couple of years. Home buyers can pay more. Investors are experiencing wage inflation is impacting rents. Rents impact yield. So wage inflation is going to cause the yield to go up for investors. So homeowners can buy more, investors spend more when they buy it. Investors can invest more when they buy it. So I think that the 40-year mortgage is going to be more standard. It's available now for people coming off of forbearance. It has to be offered. So another reason for prices to go up. Run the numbers and see what your yield will be as an investor. That will tell you if you can buy the property, because price is only one of the aspects in that equation. 23, the Sanchez. Hi, Dion. Howdy. For your house hacking strategy, how often would you move onto the next house hack property? I've been investing a little over 10 years. Have house hacked twice. So it's not like you have to move every year. The more often you do it in the beginning, the easier because you can do lower down payments. But once the income snowball kicks in, you don't really need to do the low down payments. Your savings will build faster. So I've only house hacked twice. Um, I'm probably going to do it again in the next couple of years into another property, but the income snowball is a factor. Once you have cash flowing assets and you're gaining appreciation and experiencing principal pay down, and all of that thing just kind of comes together, it becomes a lot easier to save the down payments at 20 or 25% for the next property. Danny Gates. I've been educating like crazy, but scared to jump in on the 2022 market as a newbie. I hear conflicting speculation on what's to come. Wait for a crash, slow down, or keep looking and get in now. Videos that say there's a crash coming or there's a correction coming get a lot of clicks. So you go, and if you've looked at one, the YouTube algorithm is going to show you a bunch more because it does two things. It creates a little bit of fear in some people that lived through the last crash when it was bad for some people that had no equity, and it creates confirmation bias. We want prices to come down so we can buy cheaper, right? Like with stocks, you buy it when it's in the dip and then it goes back up. So we want to hear those things. So you look at the videos that have the title, but there is nothing in play that can make prices go down. The longer you wait right now, the more you're going to pay. In 2008, we had adjustable rate mortgages. We had ninja loans. You can walk into a bank and say the words, I make $400,000 a year, sign a piece of paper that says that, and they'll loan you as much as they wanted to. We don't have any of that now. People were borrowing 105% of the loan. I did this. I bought a house, single family house to live in. I wasn't an investor yet. Financed the closing costs into the amount of the loan. So I purchased a house with negative equity with an adjustable rate mortgage. Like I was one of the people that would have almost had the problem because what happened was that a couple of years later, the adjustable rate mortgages went up and the people couldn't handle the new payment. The original plan was when your adjustable rate mortgage goes up, you'll just refinance. Well, rates went up, so they couldn't refinance. And they weren't doing ninja loans anymore. They started to verify income because they knew there was a problem. So we have all of these reasons that caused. Then, I mean, it's even a little more deep than that. They bundled bad loan packages together and sold them on the secondary note market, which is above my pay grade, but I know that was a big contributor to the crash too, right? Right now, people have equity. We have forbearance for people that are working. They don't even have to prove that they're having a problem. They can go on forbearance. Interest rates are low. The last time interest rates doubled, home prices tripled. It was in the 70s before I was old enough to buy anything. But in the 70s, the data's there. It showed Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time has a spreadsheet on his channel where he talks about when the rates doubled, home prices tripled because home prices were tied to wages, not interest rates. And what are we seeing now? Wage inflation across the board. People are having to be bribed to go to interviews. McDonald's was giving cash giveaways to make, if you showed up for the interview, they would give you money. Fast food places are starting people at $18 an hour now just to get them off of extended and extra unemployment. So wage inflation is going to set prices, set rents, all of these factors that are causing prices to go up right now. The longer you wait, the more you're going to pay. So you're doing the right thing by educating yourself, but it's really hard to steer a parked car. Take some action. Have you picked a market? Have you talked to a lender to find out what you qualify for? Because the order of operations for buying a rental property for all of us, learn how to save. If you're not saving when you don't make any money, you're not going to save when you start making money. Get your credit score as good as you can. You're shooting for a 740 or higher so that you get the best interest rates. Then you talk to a lender. I'm 3 steps in. I haven't talked to a real estate agent yet. That comes after lender. Lender tells you how much you can borrow and maybe some things that might fix your credit or your work history or things you need to verify to qualify for things. Like if a lot of your income comes from tips or overtime, you need to prove it with your tax returns. They might give you some advice that helps you do it. Then you talk to an agent, get your auto searches set up. So these are all things you can do before you've even made an offer. So if you're educating yourself, look at all the things I listed off that you can be doing before you do anything that takes a massive amount of commitment. So once you get to here, it just makes sense to start making offers on deals that would hit the yield you're looking for. Hope that helped. Joe, I'm running the numbers to factor it at 25% down. But if I'm doing 5 to 15, do I still use 25? So I usually run it at 20% down. I'll do 25 if I'm doing 25, but if I do less than 20, I'll usually do 20. I think if you were doing 15 or 10, maybe you could just use that number as long as you were doing it on all of the properties you were looking at. The reason I say I do it at 20 is because I have a VA loan available. Let's say I bought a fourplex with 0 down. That return is going to look great, but it might be a bad property. It might not have been the best use for my VA loan. So I want to run it like I had 20% in the down payment so that I can compare apples to apples, all of those properties the same. But 15 or 10, that's a big enough down payment to where you might use that for your yield, as long as you were using it the same on all of the properties you were looking at. If you're looking at a house hack and you're using 5% down, but you're running the numbers like it's after you've moved out and it's rented, that's not a fair comparison to a house that you put 20% down or 25% down as an investment property. That's why I'm trying to standardize as much data as I can so that the property, the area average rents, and my mortgage payment are going to be what tells me if it's a good return or not. Carrie, do I need to have 25% loan to value to get the PMI dropped on an investment property? I got an appraisal done and my value came in at over 20%, but the mortgage company told me I needed 25%. So that is mortgage company specific. With FHA, it's for the forever till you refinance out of the loan or pay it off. With conventional, what I've heard from the lenders I've worked with is it's 22%. If you're buying a property and you put 20% down, there's no PMI. But if you put less than 20% down and you have PMI, as soon as you get to 22%, PMI is supposed to automatically go away. So I would check your loan documents, but it's lender specific. If they say it's 25, dig into your loan documents to see if you can find that, or even ask them. Just say, hey, in that 72-page thing that we filled out when I bought this place, what page was that on? Yes, that makes sense. Jason, howdy. Sonia, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. Chester, 40-year mortgage, pro, smaller monthly payment, con, pay more interest over time. Thank you. Good. That's actually accurate. Very accurate. Jeremy, not everyone loves it, but Zillow Rentals has property management, scrambles numbers, and all the calls and convo with renters is recorded. There is an acknowledgement that they sign $10 per month service. Okay, I have not looked into that. Jonathan, what do you consider to be a large enough population when choosing a location to invest? So there's a list of things that I go through when I was looking at a market. It was economic drivers, a base, a port, a college, a hospital, a Boeing or Amazon terminal, and a population of at least 100,000. Each one of those is one of the criteria. I own a rental property in a town called McKenna. There's probably 300 people that live in that town, maybe. Or maybe 300 houses. So however many families that would make people out of. But it's centralized to the state capital, to Mount Rainier, to a large military base, where a lot of people that live in military bases here in Washington might be from the middle of Texas, where they like it more rural. They don't want to live on the Tacoma side of the base, so they live on the other side. So I have enough economic drivers toward the population of that area. Didn't matter. So I would invest in a small population area as long as the other criteria was strong enough. I also list out when I buy a property, I like to help limit tenant turnover. I don't have it here, but I have a list of things for limiting tenant turnover. One of them is I like side-by-side units because you don't have noise complaints if tenants live above or below another, and if there's ever a plumbing issue, like, uh, somebody just sent me, they had a plumbing issue on, like, a 3rd floor, and it went all the way down through all 3 floors. Side-by-side units don't do that, but I'm a teaching assistant in the BiggerPockets, uh, boot camps, and in a live session, I was looking at rentals from my auto searches and telling them this is how I screen it. I found a good rental that had a great yield in the right area, but it was an over under property. In the middle of the live session, I sent a text message to my agent saying, "Here's the MLS number. I want to make an asking price offer with this much earnest money, non owner occupied, this much down." So population is one of the factors. Side by side is one of the factors. I want washer dryer units inside inside each unit. That's one of the factors. If something's missing, that's not a deal breaker. It means I want the other criteria to be strong enough to justify making the purchase. So if the other things are really soft, like there's only one employer, then the population has to be massive. Or I would want more of the other criteria. If the smaller the population is, the more other things I would want. Core 4. Thank you, Warhorse. That is exactly what he calls it. Luis, did a cash out on my duplex, so I have 45K cash. What should I do next? So you did a cash out with 45. I would ask, are you house hacking? My go-to strategy is always to start house hacking. If you can't, it would be before I did the cash out refi, but you're already there. Where are you going to deploy the funds? I would put the money in a savings account because I wouldn't want to tie it up in any kind of market fund or anything where it would be harder to get out, or uh, anything where it wouldn't look seasoned, so that it was in your account for a couple of months, because after 2 months, you don't have to explain where that money came from. Pick your market, pick your strategy, start making offers. Let's hear the Batman story. Vitamin D and zinc. So the Batman story, if my son is still here. He didn't text me not to say it. We were in a store, and my son, his voice is about like mine. We sound like a normal person on a normal day. And this relatively cute girl in front of us dropped something. So he picks it up to hand it to her. And out of nowhere, instead of, "Hey, you dropped this," he goes, "You dropped this." And his voice dropped like 2 octaves because he was talking to a cute girl. I had to laugh and walk away. Anyways, not that great of a story, just something I always bring up whenever my son talks about the Batman voice. Julie, lots of Gatorade. Yep. I'm probably doing it all wrong. I usually go for Mountain Dew and vodka. Phil, thanks for the channel. You've inspired me to get out of my house and do something with 300 in equity. Getting ready to sell and combing the MLS daily. Awesome. The MLS is where all my deals come from, and the deals are still on there. I think speed is important. And yes, Rob, sorry, I have a cold. So this will be an awesome video to come back to and listen to when I don't feel so bad. What sucks, because I really was looking forward to the Tacoma 5 meetup tonight. It only happens once a month. A bunch of local investors get together, but I'm not going to take this and give it to all of them. So what was the app you used to find contractors? I will type it out because I'll probably pronounce it wrong. The Thumbtack app is what I use to find contractors. It's really good because the contractors that are on there are at least tech savvy enough to understand how apps work. You get to read reviews before you hire them. You get to get quotes through email before you hire them, and they know you're going to get to leave a review when you're done. So I've never had a bad experience with Thumbtack because they know I'm going to get to leave a review when the project is done. Julie, howdy. Bought my kids Ethereum for Christmas. Nice. Cool. Um, my daughters don't watch this. I got my daughter's VR systems this year. My son does watch this, so I got him Cole. Nate, good evening. Howdy. I am looking to get into real estate. When a realtor starts sending you properties on the MLS, does the listing include current rents and operating expenses? Yes, but they're completely made up BS. That's the technical term for it. There's a caveat in the listing that says these are pro forma, basically saying the buyer needs to verify all of this information to the point where I was looking at a duplex and the area average rents were at the time, this is a long time ago, 12 to 1300, and the tenant was paying 1450. They had a lease. It was 1450. I went by for the inspection. Found this is the only deal I've ever backed out of. Once the offer was accepted, it 50,000 appraisal low, so the low appraisal was part of it. The home inspection found about $50,000 worth of work that I needed to do. So I spent like $1,100 on inspection and appraisal that I'll never get back, but I'm happy because I spent that money and I didn't have to go with that deal. But I was talking to the tenant, and the tenant said, yeah, it was really cool. I didn't have the money for a deposit, so they just raised the rent for the first year. So that tenant thought that at the end of the year, their rent would be going down to the area average because their deposit was made throughout the whole year. That wasn't worded that way in the lease. I never would have known that. I would have been, I wouldn't have found out if I didn't have that one 30-second conversation with the tenant. So whenever I'm looking at a property, I don't care what the current rents are. I don't care what the current expenses are. I do want to know if utilities aren't in tenants' names. So yeah, I guess I do want to know that kind of expense. But with the binder strategy, I want to know what the area average rents are. And that's my job to learn that. So I study the market, like Michael Zuber says, from 60 to 90 days, learn your market, do the work every day, figure out the area average rents. Whatever the rents are, my goal is that they'll probably be about 10% below that after I own the property. That gives me a buffer in case the rents aren't where the area average is. And that way I'm not going off of data that a seller put on there to make the place look more attractive. So you can ask for rent rolls, proof that the rent was made, but even that can be because their deposit was included or because they're paying for damage that they caused or something where, dig deeper. And if the rent is ever above the area average, don't count on it. Um, Sorry, here we go. Okay. Your screen. I understand the logic that home multifamily prices can be analyzed based on payment where the property is mortgaged. However, if I'm paying cash for the property, there's no advantage to be gained. So you still have a cash on cash return. You still have a yield. If you're buying it with cash, if you pay $100,000 for a property, or if you put $20,000 down as an investment, you have a monthly amount of income. You're still going to have property taxes and insurance and setting aside for capex and vacancy. So you still have a monthly expense. But the amount of money that you put down is significantly more than if you use leverage. So it usually seems like the more money you put into the deal, the better the return will look. But if you buy a property cash for 100,000, you're only gaining appreciation. Actually, I have a video on my channel called "All Cash versus Leverage." That can tell you the benefits to whether you want to pay all cash or not. I wouldn't want to buy all cash. I like the idea that if I spent $20,000, invested $20,000, took it from the bank, put it in the property, I'm getting appreciation on a $100,000 property. So if you bought a property for $100,000 and you paid all cash and it went up 10%, you gained $10,000. If I took $100,000 but $20,000 five times and bought five properties, I still invested the same amount. We both put in $100,000, but if mine goes up 10%, I make $50,000 instead of $10,000. So there's a point where for me, up to 70%, I like to be leveraged because you're gaining appreciation on multiples of what you invested. You're experiencing tenant pay down where the tenants pay the principal down every month. So it really depends on where you want to be. I do have a paid off property. So not all of my properties have mortgages on them. There's that comfort that comes from the safety net of knowing that I've got that much equity. But I might do a cash out refinance if I find a place to put that money to work. The goat. You're the goat. Moon. Any recommendations for software to manage properties? Hamlin seems to have a pretty good system. I've looked into that. I haven't pulled the trigger yet. With 16 rental units, here's how my business structure looks. And it's so simple that even with my memory, I have it memorized. One checking account, one savings account, one credit card paid off daily used for cash back, one Excel spreadsheet with a tab for expenses and a tab for rental income sent to the CPA, and I sleep like a baby. That's it. Check your local area. You might have to put deposit money in a separate interest-bearing account. But it's really simple for me. I thought I had something here. No, I don't have it with me. I had, or do I? It was here. But it's moved. And I'll be off camera for like 2 seconds. So some people are really comfortable with software where you can pull it up, you can email it to yourself. My entire rental business fits into this book. And some people have a vision board where you put up a picture of your properties and you want more pictures because it motivates you to see the next properties go there. In this book, if I can figure it out, each property gets 10 pages. So the idea of the vision board being motivating is there's a lot of 10 pages in this book. So on each set of 10 pages for the property, there is a picture of the property. There's the book where the codes for the locks go to. There is the mortgage number when it was originated. Then I actually list out the tenants as they go through, what their rents are. So at any given point in time, no matter where I'm at in the world, I can tell somebody, go grab my business book because this is the insurance number that I need, or anything like that. But if I was going to look into software, to me, the amount of time that it takes to put it in would make how much time it takes to manage my properties probably even take longer. Because an Excel spreadsheet, which I give out for free, what mine looks like. So if anybody wants what my spreadsheet looks like, feel free to email me. I'm not tech savvy enough to attach it to my YouTube channel, but I will send it to you. It's really kindergarten simple. These are the properties, these are the expenses, these are the notes, this is the income, this is what property it goes to. And it's in the format that my CPA has adjusted to where it gets him the data that he needs. You can make this as complicated or as simple as you want to. Matthew, howdy. Thanks for doing the deal deep dive delve with me the other day. On average, how many offers do you submit compared to how many get accepted? Go mutual. Here's the math. And the first number is a little fuzzy. I think I look at about 100 properties to make 20 offers to get one accepted. That's kind of been the math. And the 100 might be 90 to 130, but I make 20 offers to get one accepted. It's probably been my average, but I'm not very aggressive. I don't do far above asking unless the math makes sense there. I do a larger earnest money to try to get attention. I use speed. Speed is your friend. And then my friend, who I just like handheld walked through the purchase of a duplex, I believe she made 3 offers. We looked at 5 properties. She made 3 offers. She got one accepted, and then we negotiated it down. And her deal is great. Her deal was so good. I made this offer to her. I said, because it's her first one. I said, look, I get you're nervous. I get this is a lot of money. I mean, you're spending like $500,000, right? So that's how it sounds when you invest this kind of money. This deal is so good. If you ever don't want it, I'll buy it from you and give you every penny you've put into it. So we're keeping track of everything that she spent to buy this property. And if she ever decides she doesn't want to do it, I'll buy it from her. Her return is close to 20% from day one. So it's a great deal in a great area where I invest. It's got all checks off all my boxes. Yep. Angel, the beard looks good on you. Thanks. I had a beard for a while. When I had hair, I had a beard. And then a friend went through some medical procedures, and I said, look, you're going to lose all your hair. I'll lose all my hair. So, and then I've just shaved it ever since. So well, try this again. Jason, would you use a service like Rocket Mortgage, or would you try and use Matt, the mortgage guy, when starting out just to see what you qualify for? So I have an order of operations for lending, and it morphed over time. So for the first 10 years, I would go to a large bank, Wells Fargo or Bank of America, or somebody that has really standardized criteria, and find out what I'm qualified for. Because other lenders are usually more relaxed than that, can lend more, have different criteria. Once I've had that approved, I would make my offers. When I had a property under contract, I would go to Guild Mortgage and Fairway Mortgage. And in the first few years, I went to a couple of credit unions. I did not know Matt, the mortgage guy, then. I've never had luck with credit unions. They were horrible. So it would be the big bank, Guild Mortgage, Fairway Mortgage. I would get all three of their offers in writing and share it with all three. I would say, here's what Wells Fargo is offering. Here's what Guild's Mortgage. This is what Fairway offers. They would look at them. A lender is the first one to tell you, these fees seem high. This buy down rate seems high. I could beat this interest rate. For the first 3 or 4 mortgages, Wells Fargo won. They just at the time had the better product. And I don't care what someone's opinion of a business is. I'm doing this from a business point of I want to know what my cost is, because I don't care where the money's going. I want to know what's going to help me get the best yield. The last 4 and 2 refinances, Fairway Mortgage beat them. My most recent one, where I'm looking at this cash out refinance from Matt, the mortgage guy, he connected me with a broker here closer to me. Seems like I should have went with them the whole time, but I didn't know they existed. So even though I've got them now, I'm going to compare their rates with other lenders, just like a contractor. If you have a contractor and your relationship is really good, but you're going to have a deck put in for $5,000 to $10,000, are you only going to get one quote? I mean, at some point you might, if you've worked with that contractor enough, but for the first 5 to 10 years, I'm still going to get a few quotes. So if you'll do a few quotes for a $5,000 to $10,000 project, I'm definitely going to do 3 quotes on a 30-year commitment for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's my order of operations for lending. US. Somebody's going to have to tell me what your name means. US. You screen. I personally used Rocket for 2 adjacent triplexes this past May. They did a 75% LTV and 30-year fixed rate at 3. Good. So that's what it comes down, rate and term. Who's going to give you the best rate? Thank you. Knock it on. Howdy. I use Rentec Direct. They are out of Idaho. Okay, good. For your PM software. Good. That's one to check out. Jonathan, the Batman story sounds fun. Let's hear it, please. Okay, I did that a little bit earlier. I think if you missed it. I think we've gotten through all the questions, and I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes in case there's more questions. I usually do these as long as the questions keep coming. I had a topic. I did the topic at the beginning of this video. If you came in late, the beginning, the first 10 minutes or so was how to pick a market. So hopefully that's helpful. If you want to later, go back and listen to those first 10 minutes. Cool. I am growing a beard for now. We'll see how it goes. Now that November is over, I can do it because I never understood the no shave November. But so tips for newbie living in rural Alaska. The owners of the truck driving school that I work at, the other owners, are from Alaska. Um, I am always confused by why people live in a place where the environment is trying to kill you, whether that's desert, cold, uh, yeah. Um, so if you're living in rural Alaska, are you investing there too, or are you investing in a distance? Because you know your market there. If that's where you're living, you know where do tenants come from, what sources are there. I'm sure there's a ton of companies that work in Alaska, right? Everybody always talks about the ones that work on the wall, but what other companies are there? Because I wouldn't want to invest where there was only one driving source for tenants. And how rural are you? Is it the town where 30 Days of Night was filmed, where half the year you're in darkness, uh, or is it the type of Alaska along the coast where the cruises go to in the summer? I would think that might be uh, good for short-term rental, but you'd be seasonal. Definitely understand winterization of your property depending on how long you've lived there. Have I ever used USDA loan? I understand it's zero down for a rural property. I was looking into one for a ranch here called 6 Mile Ranch because it was confusing. It was 3 structures with 9 horse stalls on 37 acres, and the VA loan was an option, but there was some reason with the horse stalls where it looked too much like a business for them. So USDA was the other one to go for. I have not used one, so I haven't had a positive or negative experience with it. I know that I would take some research to do it if I was going to use one. That's for sure. Chester, curious about the different class of neighborhoods. So I probably need to research this and do an actual video on that or start a live stream with it. Brandon Turner of BiggerPockets has an article where he broke down the classes of neighborhoods, and they used letters, so A, B, C, D. D was a war zone where you couldn't feel safe to go collect the rent there. The police don't go there unless they're in a team, safety in numbers. Class A was your super high end. um, I prefer to invest in class C. So the way I mentally process it is working class. This is where your cops live. This is where your nurses live. This is where your average working person lives. Your class A and B are the people who make more money and want nicer things. And if there's ever an economic downturn, like a pandemic or a crash or something, people from A and B properties can move to class C to save money. Hardly anybody's going to move from A, B, or C down to D. So in bad times, there will be more demand for my type of property. Uh, I think class B properties might rent better. I know Jeremy he buys a property that's in a B neighborhood, but the property's kind of falling apart, looks like a C property, and then he upgrades everything to class B, and then he moves out. He's doing a rinse and repeat house hack strategy. We did a deal deep delve together. He's got 8 kids, been doing it a little over 3 years, and was already able to quit his job and do this full time. So it's a great strategy for class B if that's what you prefer, but almost all of mine are class B or class C, sorry. But Brandon Turner's article really breaks it down on like Panera Bread and some other businesses. If they're in the area, then that tells you the class that it is, because big chain companies research markets to figure out what stores to put there. And the stores will tell you what's going to be happening with that neighborhood. And it's really cool. It's kind of a side note with real estate. In the stock market, insider trading gets you sent to prison. In real estate, it makes you a bunch of money. An example is there is a town where Matthew lives, Matthew Duprell, who we did the deal deep dive. There was a mushroom farm there that's been there for 20 or 30 years. And every couple of years, that mushroom farm, which had a really bad smell and it affected the area, kept the rents down, kept the property prices down. The city of that mushroom farm went to war at court over and over and over like 15 years. The mushroom farm was there first. The city happened second. The mushroom farm had all the right to be there until they didn't. They finally lost the case and they moved away. So I bought a duplex there. I knew that the mushroom farm was going away. It's like I had insider information. That duplex that I purchased has doubled in price in 3 years. and the rents there have skyrocketed because the smell was gone the first season that they didn't do their work there with the mushroom farm. So if you're looking at class of neighborhood, you can also look at upgrades that they're doing. What is being added to an area? Same thing with that same area with the mushroom farm. They took the overpass of a major freeway and turned it into some European two roundabouts on the bridge where traffic is reversed. Really upgraded everything. That entire area is the place where, if you know that's coming, you could buy there. Now that those things are there and the prices have doubled, it's more competitive than it was. So it's being ahead of the curve on things like that when you can. Rankin, howdy. What's happening? Late to the party. Love the goatee. Thank you. It's my Santa Claus impersonation. Chester, the video I meant. I know that was something previously mentioned. Cool. Your screen. Renee Collins, USC alumni. Would you ever invest in blue state? I heard what you said about Grant Cardone preferring blue states because of the property appreciation due to difficulty to build. So I'm in Washington State, which technically is a blue state. I said it earlier, though, there's like 39 counties. Pretty much most of them are red. There's one that's blue. I don't invest in the blue county because they've actually got some insane laws going there. Like, the state of Washington doesn't allow rent control. There's a revised code of Washington that says rent control is illegal in this state. So it's a state I want to invest in. I have some people that I've met that invest in Oregon, where rent control is the thing that's making it almost impossible to find a deal that makes sense. But in Seattle, you have to give 6 months notice for a rent increase over 10%. Okay, I don't mind giving notice. That's no problem. If the tenant doesn't like to or want to accept the 10%, you have to pay to move them. It's a form of rent control that's just structured differently. And then they have, the eviction moratorium is extended there, and they usually extend it to the point where winter kicks in. So we extend it to where we can't do evictions during the winter. So yeah, I would avoid places. So it's not so much red or blue. It's which places are more fair. I don't care that it's landlord friendly above tenants. I just don't want it to be more tenant friendly above landlord. The more equal it can be, that's where I want to invest. Yeah. Julie, any inside scoop on the trucking industry? Driver demand is at an all-time high. We had a driver shortage up until 2019 that was over 300,000, and then the pandemic hit and demand went up. Wage inflation is hitting like crazy. Local companies are doing $10,000 to $15,000 sign-on bonuses. It isn't looking any better, and the trucking industry problem that's happening in California with the things that can't come off the freights, the ships, isn't a driver shortage and isn't a trucking shortage. It is a legislation problem. To operate in California, your trucks have to be 2015 or newer. And by 2034, all vehicles are supposed to be electronic vehicles or, EVs. So companies can't buy trucks. They can't run an older fleet, and they don't want to replace them with trucks that are going to be outdated by 2034. So companies can't grow to handle the demand. So that's my inside scoop on the trucking industry. I know that we just had a meeting with the state agencies that work with the governor to try to help solve the driver shortage here in Washington State. And the bottleneck for us is testing. You have plenty of people who want to become drivers. You have plenty of schools that can train them, but the state can't get them tested. So that's one of the things that's contributing to the demand here is that we can't supply enough drivers. And then I lost this. Jeremy, B to A is great, especially when you are looking at larger homes. If your goal is rental, it's amazing. Yep, you're killing it, Jeremy. So you know what you got going on there. Larry, I have 50% share of a 5-bedroom single-family house, free and clear, owned with siblings. Should I suggest to siblings to sell or use it as a rental? Maybe Section 8 and leverage my half ownership for next deal, HELOC or refi. Is it possible for you to take out a mortgage on the property to buy your siblings out of their portion if they're not interested in being owners of a rental? That's the first thing I would think of is how do I acquire this asset fairly to give them their money out if they're not looking at being involved in real estate. Lending would get very interesting if there are multiple people who own a property, if you thought about just taking out your portion of equity to put it to use somewhere else, because you're putting the bank in first position, even though there's other people that own it. So that would look like a form of a partnership. Part of that would depend on your relationship with your siblings. Yeah, that's a confusing one. And then the HELOC or refi, which one of those to use really depends on your situation. So if they can work, even if while there's other owners of the property, the home equity line of credit has an adjustable rate mortgage, so I want to use it for short-term debt that I was going to pay off quickly. The refi, you're getting 30-year fixed rate debt. The time that makes the most sense to me is when there's an existing mortgage, you're going to get a better rate on. There's not an existing mortgage. But can you put that money to work somewhere else and get a good return, enough to pay for the return on the investment property and the loan that you're taking the money out from? But it all still boils down to your relationship with your siblings. Josh, howdy. I'm doing homework in Thurston and Pierce County near you. What areas would you avoid? In Pierce County, if you see anything that says McKinley Ave, I would avoid there. 10 years ago, I would avoid anything that said Hilltop, but Hilltop's been turned around. Where would I avoid in Pierce and Thurston County? I look at the whole that's my footprint is Pierce and Thurston County. I do avoid McKinley Ave in Tacoma. Anything close to 301 T Street in Tumwater, avoid that like the plague. That is the place when I was an officer in Tumwater until 2008, and you don't go there alone. Even the officers go there in pairs. Yeah, well, these are good areas to invest in. We've got a lot of economic drivers. There's a lot of demand here. Rents are skyrocketing. I'm using the binder strategy this year, and I'm seeing 20 to 40% rent increases at tenants' request. BAH was up here again. I think a couple of years, like 4 years ago, it was like 1,400. Then it went to 1,800 and 2,150. So BAH around a large military installation often sets what the area average rents are. Yeah. So if you have a good agent, great. If not, reach out to me. I've got a rock star here I can connect you with. Knock it on. What is the down payment for owner occupied? I found a fourplex that I want to house hack while selling your house in Arizona. For FHA, it's 3.5% up to 4 units. So I would usually prefer a conventional loan over an FHA if I was buying a single family house. But when you're in small multifamily, right now lending fees are so high that 2, 3, and 4plexes, a lot of lenders are wanting 15% down. So if 15% down is too much, although if you're doing a sale of your house, you might have the cash to do the down payment. 15% down is what I've heard from a lot of lenders for owner occupied. If you go FHA, it's only 3.5% down. If I had my choice, and I had the money, I would go conventional, 15% down. Look at the loan documents earlier. There was a question. Normally, what happens is if you put less than 20% down, you have PMI, which isn't a deal breaker. My friend is paying PMI. It's like $61 a month. So her cash flow covers that with no problem. At 22%, the PMI goes away. If you can put 20% down, you don't have PMI. But at 15%, you would have PMI. And I lost the chat. There we go. Emerson sent me an email. Cool. I will look for that. Martin, howdy. What apps or services do you use to screen tenants? I was using cozy.co, which was a Canadian company that was acquired or purchased by apartments.com. My last tenant flip, I used apartments.com. I had no problem. It's free for the owner. It's a $45 fee for the tenant, and it gives you an eviction report, credit history, credit report. So apartments.com is the one that I used. Jeremy, good night. Thanks for hanging out. Let's put your 8 little kiddos to bed. It was kind of funny if you watched his deal deep delve. He was holding a baby basically through the whole video, but you don't see it till the very end. At the very end, he gets up, walked away with a baby. Emerson, would you recommend buying an investment property as your first home? Yes. Especially if you could buy a duplex or a house with an ADU, two houses on one property. Owner occupied lending gets you a lower down payment, a better interest rate, 30-year fixed rate debt. If you could house hack, your housing expense is usually your biggest expense. It's right up there with taxes for most of us. And if you can reduce or eliminate your housing expense, that's the easiest thing you could do to increase your savings rate. The sooner you buy a rental and get rental income on your tax returns, the sooner your debt to income ratio starts to mean less to a lender. When I first started, I was only making $17 an hour. I found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name I didn't know about until the divorce. And I was a single parent with 3 kids. I couldn't qualify to buy a property. So I was living in a house that I had purchased before I was an investor. I moved into an apartment and rented out the house so that I can get that rental income on my tax returns. After 2 years, I purchased a duplex. I was able to buy the duplex because I had the cash flow from the house and the rental income from the other unit on the duplex in my debt to income ratio, so that even though I wasn't making a lot of money and I had a lot of bad debt, lenders would work with me because they factored rental income in my debt to income ratio. So if you have the option of buying a rental property as your first investment, to me, that takes priority over owning a house. I still don't own a house. I still house hack. I'm living in the unit of one of the units of a fourplex where I'm being paid to live here. So yes, rental. Emerson, we are not in a place to move somewhere and settle down, but want to invest in a vacation market and get short-term. So you can invest for that. Investing at a distance is challenging. Investing for short-term rentals is challenging because sometimes legislation or rulemaking by the municipality can change and you lose the ability to do that. So if you're going to buy a property with the goal of doing short-term rentals, I would make sure that it will cash flow as a long-term rental something. So you're not losing money in case you lose the ability to do short-term rental there. Josh, you're welcome. Rankin, Tumwater. My company has a plant there. Amcor Rigid Packaging. Ever hear of it? Doesn't come to mind, which means I haven't served a lot of warrants there. So that's good. And I was only a cop for 8 years. So I don't know everything there. How can we give back value to me? Every content creator on YouTube always asks, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. That's cool. Best compliment, and everybody listening, the best compliment you can give to any content creator, if you have somebody you watch that you like, if you watch Michael Zuber, the Lumberjack Landlord, or any of these channels that actually give good information, not the ones that talk about the fear and the crash and all that kind of stuff. In any social media that you're in, Instagram, Facebook, any of the groups, if you find a video of ours that you like and you share it in there, because as a content creator, I can't go onto any forum and say, hey, I've got this video, check it out. You just get kicked out of the group. But I can share one rental at a time's video. So I go in and I share when he comes out with a video, I'm like, hey, check this video out. One of my videos that I love to do this just to see how long it takes me to get kicked out is I go into the Dave Ramsey groups and then take my video that says, I wish I had more debt, and I put a link in there. My goal is to get kicked out. But if you're trying to say, thanks to us, what can you do for us to help us? Share the content. Because in the Three Amigos last week, me, Michael Zuber, Matt the Lumberjack Landlord, I kind of had a moment of transparency where I explained how I thought I'm failing. The videos where people talk about a crash or a correction and they create fear and people postpone investing and they just put it off and they're not taking any action because they're waiting for something that's never going to happen. People have been waiting since 2013 for that crash. It's not here yet. So they're missing out on appreciation, principal pay down, cash flow, all the tax benefits. But when we make a video saying there is no crash coming, it gets 1,000 views, not 50,000. So I feel like I'm not a good enough communicator to get this information out to enough people. So that's how you can help, is if you could share this content, that's a huge compliment to us and helps us get this information out. Because the more people that we help reach financial freedom, the better everything is. Imagine a place where people had jobs they wanted instead of jobs they had to have because they need the money. Knock it on. Yeah, I have too many properties. I don't think I can qualify for FHA, full-time real estate investor. Interesting. I would talk to a lender to find out if you can. If not, you might be stuck going the way that I prefer with a 15% down conventional loan if you're going to owner occupy. I don't like to be over leveraged. One of the main reasons I haven't used my VA loan is I don't want to be 100% leveraged on a property. It kind of makes sense now because I like to maintain 70% leverage and I'm at about 55%. So I have some equity to play with there, and I could do 100% financing on another property and still be overall less than 70% leveraged. But I haven't done that yet. I like having a down payment on the property. I like knowing that that asset can support itself by itself. Okay, I want to use my free and clear home for investing purposes. So that's where, with a portfolio of your size, you have the option of sell, cash out, refinance, home equity line of credit. Look at your overall picture. How are you going to redeploy the funds, and which one of those makes the most sense? Chester, what's your take on buying points? Is there a strategy more useful than buying points, such as buy and hold, BRRRR, etc.? So I do buy and hold. I have a search set up for a BRRRR strategy. I've talked about this before, where I don't think when we're starting out we should use the BRRRR method because there's too many points where you can make a huge mistake. So buy and hold is my strategy to start with. I usually buy points down, so it depends on how long it would take to make the money back that you're buying it down. And I usually compare lenders to figure out if I want to do that or not. So far for me, on most of my loans, it's made sense to buy the points down because I'm buying and hold the goal forever till mortgage is paid off, till I die. That's, till death do us part is my motto with properties. I haven't sold any yet. If I was only going to have it for a few years, or I was going to do a refinance in a few years, I wouldn't buy the rate down. It's long. The longer the term that I intend to have that loan, the more important it is to have the rates bought down. Levi, do you get a business license in the cities you own investment properties of? Nope. Some places require them, and some places require them once you have a certain number of units. So check your local laws. No business license, no LLC, no business structure. Everything's in my name. Your cities could require it. I do have one city that requires $12 a year per unit to register the rental. Never understood what it's for, but I'm never buying in that city again because they do have an inspector that they sent out who had ridiculous criteria. It was a 19-year-old with no education in real estate. So there are some 19-year-olds who are educated in real estate. If Cody Davis came out and inspected one of my properties, I would take everything he said to heart because he knows what he's doing. But this 19-year-old didn't. He actually made my tenant switch out a light switch cover because it was a Disney light switch in the kids' room, and it wasn't uniform with the rest of the things in the house. So I'm never buying in that city again. And of course, as soon as he left, we switched this cover back for the kid, but each city is different. Chester, follow-up. Should there be a minimum number of points to buy, or would that simply be manipulating the acquisition cost? Again, it's how long do you plan on keeping the loan? Not just the property, but are you going to cash out refinance for a better rate? Are you going to sell that property? For me, run the numbers kind of like it's a yield. If I spend $4,000 to buy the points down, what was the monthly change going to be? Times that by 12, I can calculate my yield. I would want the yield to be better than the yield on the property. When I'm investing for the property, I like to get a 10% or better cash on cash return, but I'm also experiencing appreciation, principal pay down, and tax benefits. You're not getting that when you get the yield on spending money on buying your points down. You're just getting the cash flow difference. Sometimes talking to 2 or 3 lenders and letting them see the other lender's options, one of them may point out the best way for you to go. Thanks, Emerson. Yes, comment and engagement. Yes, thank you. And sharing. Jimena, hola, ¿cómo está? Well, thanks, Emerson. Maybe I'm missing something else. Maybe it's how to make a thumbnail or how to hit the algorithm or something, but knock it on. I just didn't know if investors had to use double-digit down payments, 25% or more. I just refinanced my second home in Colorado. It was free and clear and was put to 65. So lenders will pick different LTVs with different interest rates. Usually 50 to 65% is your best interest rate. You could do 75 with a worse interest rate. If you own or occupy, a lot of lenders will take 15%, but check with lenders. They're all different. Each time I talk to them, their numbers are different. Talk to the same lender the next week, they might even have different amounts that you need to pay down. Angel, I am about to include rental income on my taxes for the first time. Should I show the OK profit? Should I show the 6K profit? Sorry, I made, or bring it down to zero with deductions and depreciation. I want to be bankable next year. So I talked with my CPA. My goal every year is to try to show zero so that the next purchase will be a net zero again. It doesn't do you any good not to take depreciation. If you ever go to sell a property, it is considered that you used all of the depreciation that was available to you. It's just assumed that you did, if that makes any sense. Give me just a second. Thought I was going to sneeze. It's not the end of the world. So that's my goal. Talk to your CPA and try to show as close to zero as possible. They usually will take all the depreciation because you're going to anyways, but then they can control how much of your write-offs that you're going to use, because I don't want to show too much of a loss. If you're showing too much of a loss, that can make you unbankable. But always talk to your CPA on that to figure out what is legal, because as soon as I found out there were multiple types of depreciation, and this year with what's going on with the pandemic, we've got bonus depreciation that people can use. So later, as your portfolio grows, it's very easy to keep showing a zero income on rentals for at least the first decade, usually. That is a good question, because you want to make sure you're bankable the next year for the lenders. Emerson, I've noticed some of the channels I follow will have one video that goes viral and that launches the channel. You've got great content. I'm sharing with my interested friends and family. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's really weird. The other content creators that I've talked to will have a video from like 5 or 6 months ago that just all of a sudden takes off. Like the algorithm says, "Oh, I'm going to show this to 1 million people." I haven't had that yet. Chester, curious, are you looking at multifamily properties anytime soon? Yes. Well, 4 units or less. I'm never going to go 5 units or more, unless lending structures change and I find a lender that will do 30-year fixed rate debt on multifamily. So that's what attracts me to 4 units or less, is residential lending. I have 6 mortgages in my name, 7 properties. When I get to 10 in my name, that'll be the limit to the residential properties that I can have. At that point in time, I have a decision to make. Do I go to commercial lending? And then it doesn't matter if it's a 2 unit or a 20 unit, because I'm going to have the same lending structure with commercial. Or do I focus on my cash flow, pay off a mortgage before I add another? That's a future Dion problem. And one of my daughters said this thing that I thought was brilliant, and I say it often. She said, it's really hard to make a decision when both outcomes are positive. And it's true. Both of those outcomes are positive. So I'll worry about that when it happens. I lost where I was. Emerson, bonus depreciation being phased out starting 2022. It goes to 80, then to 60. That cycles down as you go through. So your CPA will know what works best for your situation. And I'm really sorry for being congested today. I appreciate everybody hanging out and putting up with somebody talking all nasally. I think we're going to call it there for the week, unless any other questions pop up really quick. Yeah, my daughter is super smart. It's crazy. It skips a generation. I look forward to the Three Amigos on Thursday. So if you guys are able to catch those videos, those are always fun to do. I won't do it, but one day I would like to have a camera set off to the side to catch the conversations that happen between videos, because those are awesome. Yeah, someday. All right. You guys have an amazing week. I will see you next Tuesday. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.